Hi folks, HR Funk here. A few weeks ago, I produced a video where I recounted the historic complaints that military personnel have had regarding the Beretta M9 pistol and why I think those complaints ultimately led the government to look at phasing out the Beretta M9 and replacing it with something that came to be known as the modular handgun system. And that video received a lot of views. It's approaching 100,000 views now, so thank you to all of you who have watched that video. And in the discussion to that video, a lot of you moved into a different discussion, which was why was the Sig pistol selected to succeed the Beretta M9? And also some of you questioned why the Sig pistol specifically was selected over some of the other proposed handguns that were submitted for evaluation in the modular handgun system trials. So in the aftermath of that video, I decided to delve into that and see if I could find out anything to try to shed some light on that question. Now, there are a lot of conspiracy theories out there and a lot of stories about underhanded dealings and one thing and another, and I really wanted to try to see if I could find any information that would shed some light on the whole affair. And in my research, I did come up with some things that I think were fairly enlightening. I'm going to present those in this video. But as I do so, even right now at the beginning of the video, I know when I get done, there are some of you who are still going to believe the conspiracy theories and the underhanded dealing and all that type of thing. But even so, I wanted to present this information that I was able to uncover so all of you would at least have the same information I do. I have two sources for the information I'm about to present. One is the Army's request for proposals for the modular handgun system that was issued August 28th of 2015, and the other is this 17-page report issued by the Government Accountability Office on June the 5th of 2017. And both of these documents are rather laborious to read. This one, as I said, is a 17-page report that's written all in legalese, and throughout all the pages there are footnotes, and you have to read the paragraph and reread it to try to figure out what it's saying and then refer down to the footnotes for clarification sometimes. The RFP, on the other hand, that was issued in 2015 is a 350-page document that is extremely difficult to slog your way through. I've done that at this point. And it goes into the minutia of the contracts for the modular handgun system. It even gets into things like how many pages the reports were supposed to have and what the font and spacing and margins for those reports are supposed to be in terms of the way they're typed. It talks about where, when, and how things are supposed to be delivered to the government. It talks about the packaging and markings for those items and everything else. So it is extremely detailed. It is very difficult to get through. But in order to try to understand this process, I felt that it was important to see what exactly was in that RFP. And I did find some things in there that I thought were helpful. Now, the nice thing about the GAO report is basically it forms a synopsis for the RFP, and this was issued because in the aftermath of Sig being selected as the winner of the modular handgun system, Glock filed a complaint with the GAO. And this report is the response of the government to that complaint that Glock filed. And it does a great job of giving an overview of the MHS process in general, and specifically why the Sig pistol was selected over the Glock pistol. Now, a lot of you have said that the reason Sig was chosen over Glock is because the Sig came in with a lower price. And you are partially right and partially not so right with that. And I'll explain that more as we go on. I think the first thing that has to be understood when we talk about the selection process for the modular handgun system is that this was not just a request for proposals for handguns. This was much more than that. In fact, this was an extremely involved request for proposals. The fact that only 5 handgun manufacturers even submitted proposals is rather telling. And when we think about some of the companies that did not submit proposals, such as some of the big names like Walther, like HK, like Ruger, that should tell you that this was somewhat a daunting process. The request for proposals was for the handguns themselves, as well as all sorts of accessories to include silencers and blank adapters and holsters and pressure test barrels. Was for ammunition, and not just one type of ammunition, but ball ammunition, special purpose ammunition, blank ammunition, and non-firing dummy ammunition. And there were many other things that had to be part of the proposal that was submitted by the various manufacturers. And I'll talk about this in detail in a little bit, and we'll go through each one of them specifically for Sig and for Glock, and we'll look at how they rated in those areas. Also, in the request for proposal, in that minutia that I talked about, was an explanation of how each rating would be awarded for each of those various factors and subfactors. Again, I'll get into that in just a little bit. But the big thing that I want to get through right now is this was not just for the handguns, it was a multitude of things. And I was a little surprised early on in this process when the Smith & Wesson M&P was dropped very, very early. And now I understand, because back at that time I thought, well, what's wrong with the M&P that's so bad that they knocked it out of contention right at almost the very beginning? Now I understand that there may well not have been anything wrong with the M&P itself, but there may have been something else with Smith & Wesson's submission that was unacceptable for the government, and that's why the M&P was dropped. So keep that in mind as we work our way through this. Now, in the evaluation itself, there were two parts. There was an initial evaluation, and then there was a final evaluation. In the initial evaluation, after it was done, the Army, or the government, if you will, had the option to select up to 3 candidates to move on to the final evaluation process. Now, it's important that you understand that they could select up to 3, because a big part of the complaint filed by Glock is they felt that their pistol did not get a fair shake in the process because there were not more than one pistol selected. The Sig pistol was the only one that went to the second part of the selection process. But again, in the GAO's finding, the RFP clearly said, and I read it when I was going through the RFP, and I should have noted what page it was on, but I didn't. But in the RFP, it clearly said that the Army could select up to 3. They did not have to select 2 or 3. They could select just 1, which was what they ultimately did. So in response to the Army's request for proposals, 5 manufacturers submitted packages for consideration for the modular handgun system. Those companies were Sig, Glock, Smith & Wesson, FN, and Beretta. And the Smith, FN, and Beretta pistols were rejected along the lines, and it came down to a contest between Sig and Glock in the initial part of the evaluation phase. And in that initial evaluation, the pistols were judged by the factors and subfactors in Section M of the request for proposals. And you can see that here. Section M has the technical test, which is initial reliability, system accuracy, characteristics of the projectile, joint warfighter ergonomics. And again, I'm going to talk about these a little bit more as I go. Subfactor 2 is the early warfighter acceptance and initial reliability for the compact handgun. Factor 3, written technical. Factor 4, license rights and ammunition. Factor 5, license rights, handguns and accessories. And Factor 6, production and manufacturing. Now take note of these items. Again, this was not just a selection process for new pistols. We see the pistols at the top. We see the written technical part of the proposal, which was also going to be evaluated. License rights for the ammunition. The ammunition was initially supposed to be supplied by the winning bid proposal. And that ammunition, again, this was no small undertaking, was supposed to start out at 1.2 million rounds of ball ammunition per month. And that was only the ball ammunition. There was also a component for the special purpose ammunition. There was a component for the blank ammunition and the non-firing dummy ammunition. So this ammunition part of this was very big, and there was also a requirement to be able to obtain license rights to that ammunition, I'm sure, so that if the government wanted to source it from another manufacturer, they could do so without any sort of licensing issues. Same thing with the handguns and accessories. Down in subfactor 6, they were looking at the production and manufacturing capabilities of the companies submitting proposals. If the company could not physically produce the number of handguns or the amount of ammunition required by the government, then there was no sense in awarding a contract to that manufacturer. And we can see also in that the manufacturing plan, the program management plan, quality. Price is a subfactor down near the bottom, and these factors and subfactors are listed in a descending order of importance. As we move farther down through the process, the things become less and less important. But an unacceptable rating in any factor or subfactor would drop that manufacturer from consideration for the modular handgun system. Last two, in factor 8, we have past performance, and this is something, when I saw this in the GAO report, I thought that it meant past performance for that manufacturer with the US government. But it turns out that wasn't quite right. It was not only that, but it was mainly past performance with any project of this size and scope to be able to manufacture the products and get them to the government on time and meet deadlines and all that type of thing. So they looked at that type of past performance, and also small business participation was evaluated as well. Now I want to point out the next paragraph right below this table showing section M. And the first sentence in the next paragraph says the combination of all non-price factors was significantly more important than price. So keep that in mind also as we work our way through the rest of this, that price was a factor, but it was not the most important factor. As I said before, these factors are listed in a descending level of importance, so things at the top of the table are more important than the other factors and subfactors as we move farther down the table. So now let's get into some of the specifics with regard to how both Sig and Glock fared in this evaluation. And again, I want to emphasize that the factors and subfactors are in a descending level of importance, so the factors and subfactors at the top are more important and they're weighted more heavily than those below. Beginning with factor 1, and this was the technical evaluation. For the initial reliability, both Sig and Glock received an outstanding. And that shouldn't come as a shock to anyone because these are both very reliable functioning handguns. So no problem with the functioning for either one. System accuracy, they both got a marginal. Again, shouldn't come as a shock. Neither one of these is a match grade pistol, but they did manage to have at least acceptable accuracy. The characteristics of the projectile, they both got the exact same rating. That was a tie. Joint warfighter ergonomics. I thought this was interesting because Glock got an acceptable and Sig got a good. And the good is a higher rating than the acceptable. And in reading the RFP, the way this was done is the pistols were all given to different members of the military, and they were given a questionnaire to fill out as they were shooting and handling the pistols. And the RFP actually went to the lengths of indicating that the pistol that was selected had to be acceptable by 95% of the members of the military with differing hand sizes, and they actually went to the point of measuring people's hands from the wrist to the middle of their palm and from the wrist to the end of their index finger to show what the percentages were for people in the military to be able to meet that requirement. So as people were handling the firearms and shooting them and everything, they were filling out that questionnaire, and that's how they came up with that rating as far as acceptable and good. And this situation with the ergonomics, I think, is accurate. I've said for a long time, I don't like the way Glock pistols fit my hand, and I think the Sig pistol, when I hold it, feels better. It seems to point more naturally, and it looks like the military members who were evaluating these and filling out those questionnaires tended to have the same opinion. Moving to factor 2, there's a flip-flop. Glock got a good on subfactor 2 for the overall rating, and Sig Sauer got an acceptable, but again, this is subfactor 2, so it's slightly farther down in order of importance from factor 1. The early warfighter acceptance was good for the Glock and acceptable for the Sig. Written technical was a tie. They both got the exact same score on that. License rights, again, this was one of the things that was being evaluated, and Sig got an outstanding and Glock got a marginal. So Sig got a considerably higher rating in that factor than Glock. For factor 5, all the way down, Glock got good and Sig got outstanding. So we see already that the Sig pistol is performing slightly better than the Glock in the overall evaluation. Moving down to factor 6, Glock got a good, outstanding, outstanding. Sig got 3 outstandings and a good. They both got a good for their quality plan. Now look at price. There's a difference of $100 million, actually more than $100 million between Glock's proposal and the Sig proposal. They tied for past performance, and for small business participation, they also tied. They both got a good. And the report goes on to make the point that at the end of this initial phase, the Sig pistol was evaluated slightly higher than the Glock pistol. So the Sig pistol actually did win this contest between these two pistols by a slight margin. And then they looked at the price, which was considerably less expensive for the Sig than the Glock. So all of you who have said this all came down to price, again, you are right, but there was more to it than just the price. Now bear with me while I read this next part verbatim, because this is a quote from the government's Source Selection Authority. And what this says is, based upon the technical evaluation and my comparative analysis of the proposals, the Sig Sauer proposal has a slight technical advantage over the Glock proposal. That is a quote from the Source Selection Authority. Then we move slightly farther down in the paragraph. It's actually going to be, I think, the last sentence. The price analysis shows that the Sig Sauer total evaluated price is $102,705,394 less than the Glock total evaluated price, making the Sig Sauer proposal overall the best value to the government. So it did come down to a matter of price, but look at that price difference, $102 million difference. Now, all of us at different times have complained about the government spending $500 on a hammer and $2,000 on a toilet seat and things like this. For once, the government, in the form of the Army, is trying to be good stewards of the taxpayers' money, and they were saving over $100 million with this purchase by going with the Sig as opposed to the Glock. And the SSA concludes his report with the following statement. Sig Sauer's proposal was slightly superior technically and clearly superior in factors 4 and 5. Since there were so few other discriminators between the two proposals in most aspects, the least important factor, price, became a significant discriminator. Simply put, when taking the price premium into account, there is no correlating superior performance for Glock as compared to Sig Sauer to support paying that premium. And the final sentence of that particular paragraph says that the Sig Sauer represents the best overall value to the government. Folks, at this point, I have finished this video, and I actually had just finished editing it. And something occurred to me that I thought I should probably add into this video, and I'm going to splice this into the part that you've already seen. And that has to do with part of the complaint that was filed by Glock to the GAO. And I thought I better put this in here, or else somebody's going to accuse me of trying to hide something or not being fully forthcoming or whatever. And part of the contention in Glock's complaint is that the price figure that was presented by Sig Sauer for their proposal was erroneous because they had not properly calculated the cost of spare parts and accessories. So the GAO went back and looked at that, and what they determined was, even when allowing for Glock's contention, there was still a difference in the overall price of $101,071,144 in favor of Sig Sauer. And in the opinion of the GAO, that did not make enough difference to go back and allow the Glock proposal to go on further in the modular handgun system evaluation process. So I did want to put this one little piece of information in there as well. And if any of you want to read this thing or the RFP and see for yourselves what all it says and what went into all of this, by all means do so. And if you make a comment to this video and you say that you've read this, it's going to have a lot more weight if you make an argument or you claim that I have something wrong than if you never read it at all. So in the end, the Sig pistol performed a little bit better in that evaluation than the Glock pistol. And for the overall proposal, the Sig pistol was significantly, or I should say the Sig proposal was significantly less expensive than Glock, to the point that there was no corresponding performance advantage with the Glock that would justify paying the more expensive price for their proposal. And that's the video for today. I hope you enjoyed it. Let the wailing and gnashing of teeth begin. If you have any questions or comments about this video, as always, make sure you forward those to me. Remember, if you purchase anything from Optics Planet, be sure to use my discount code, which is... And if you use that discount code, it's good for 5% off anything you purchase from Optics Planet. See you next time, folks. And until then, good shooting. Bye-bye.